Good day and welcome to Starter Training. Today, creating a winning online user experience. If you are having any trouble hearing us, you might select and deselect the audio button and you should be able to reset that. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, good day from wherever you're joining us. My name is Lori Ashley and I'd like to welcome you to the Starter Training. If you have questions for our presenters or any general questions, please add them into the question box. And if you have any technical issues or anything else, you are welcome to use chat and our support folks will be monitoring along the way. So today, my colleague Andrew French and I will facilitate the session, which has been designed to keep you moving forward in building and growing your digital archive using Starter. So as we get underway, we'd like to hear from you. So please share which target user communities you have in mind for the collections that you'll be publishing to your online public portal. And if you just type your answers into chat, the other audience members can see them and we'll share them in the future. So this is the third of 4 training sessions. The final session takes place next week. If you missed a session or are joining us for the first time, you'll find session recordings, slides, and try this exercises on the Starter resource page, which is always just a click away on the dashboard when you're working in your digital archive. Last week, Andrew and Rachel Walton from Rollins College provided practical tips for building and arranging collections and a variety of metadata management approaches. Today's focus is on helping you leverage your rich technical, descriptive, and structural metadata and Starter's integrated public-facing portal to connect your resources with stakeholders and user communities. Andrew will provide a technical demonstration, followed by a live presentation by a fellow archivist and Starter beta user. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to David Kay, who's joining us today from New York City, to share his experience using Starter and insights from an image archive project. So back to our Starter journey. Early in the training, we identified the personas we had in mind, the folks who are using Starter to build a digital archive. And we also asked about your motivations for using Starter, which included evaluating the system capabilities, learning about digital preservation practices, building a case for resources and tools, leveraging a low-cost entry to jumpstart your program, and gaining or enhancing preservation skills by you and your colleagues. Your repository mission, your current circumstances, and the value that you seek from using Starter are impacting your decisions about the collections that you've chosen to upload, the fantastic questions that you're raising and sending in to us, and the product features that you vote to have included in future releases. During today's demonstrations, we're going to focus on how Starter's integrated end-to-end system not only positively impacts your user experience as a digital archivist, but significantly boosts your ability to support your institution's programs and projects. At the beginning of the training series, I noted that Starter's capabilities are aligned to good archival and community practices. In the 2 previous sessions, we covered ingest, archival storage, preservation actions, collection arrangement, and metadata management. We turn our attention now to how Starter enables access to your digital collections. An important concept in the OIS model is the designated community. In keeping with your repository's mission, and because no one has resources to preserve everything for everyone, it's important to be really clear about those who currently and in the future will seek access to your collections. So whether you're capturing and preserving history in real time, as we've seen with COVID-19 response and recovery assets, promoting a collection to mark an important milestone or anniversary, providing resources for a class assignment, providing public access to the latest meeting minutes of your governing body, or introducing a new and unique collection not previously available for online viewing, Starter can help you quickly and easily preserve and facilitate access to your resources. Promoting the use of collections, of course, is a core domain of archival practice, and it requires a good working knowledge not only of your user communities, but also good working relationships with content creators, donors, and resource allocators. So many of the individuals and groups that your repository depends on and serves are probably listed here. Last session, we asked you about the content and collections you plan to upload to Starter, and the word cloud here captures your responses. More specifically, your responses range from born digital only, digitized special collections, a test folder of current and obsolete formats, finding aids, personal research collections, oral histories, yearbooks, and family history materials. And we thank you very much for sharing. During last week's training, both Andrew and Rachel mentioned the NDSA levels of preservation, and I'd like to take just a moment before turning this over to Andrew to make sure that everyone on the call is familiar with this resource. The version 2 matrix seen in the lower right includes 5 functional areas: storage, integrity, control, metadata, and content. And across the top of the matrix are the 4 capability levels: know your content, protect your content, monitor your content, and sustain your content. Supporting materials for how to use the matrix are available on the NDSA site in multiple languages and include a self-assessment spreadsheet to track your progress. Andrew and I are preparing a certificate for the Starter product using the NDSA assessment spreadsheet that we'll distribute at the end of next week's training. It will show how Starter supports you in making a step change in your digital preservation journey. Now let's dive into how to use Starter's integrated public portal to promote your digital archival materials, as well as broaden and diversify your outreach efforts. Now on to Andrew.
Thank you, Lori, and hi, everyone. Let me just move my video over here. Hi again, everyone. I'm Andrew French, Director of Solutions Architecture at Preservica, and today we're going to look at the practical steps of creating a winning online user experience in Preservica Starter. The design team we gathered to build Starter, led by UX designer Sandra Barkhuizen, participated in over 40 hours of live beta testing with our expert users from Beta Test 1, 2, and early release, and from over 20 different institutions from the academic, public, cultural, and corporate space. So the tips I'm going to show you today include how to easily create a branded portal that enables your users to browse, search, discover, share, and love your digital collections. And this comes directly from user experiences captured in these beta tests. So this is a system that really has been made for you. So let's jump in. As I'm logging in, it's important to note that access, outreach, and advocacy tools are intertwined with Starter, and these options appear within the back office tool here in Explorer. Of course, we're seeing helpful pop-ups all the time, letting me know when new features are being added to Starter, which is great. And of course, there are features in Starter with immediate value for our end users, such as thumbnails automatically being created by Starter to help findability, and how Starter automatically links rendering tools to your content for one-click playback and access. But what about the design elements that we all build as professional users of Starter? As I'm working on my collections, building my collection structure, and adding descriptive metadata, I am making decisions on how to present information to my designated communities. So our first tip is consider our collections and our audience. What are we putting in Starter? And will this be a collection that I'm going to show to end users? So let's consider, is my description complete? Have I added enough information to my satisfaction? Will this collection never be shown to the end users? Is the use case for the collection more internal? Is there a temporary exhibit or collection I would like to promote? Is this part of an iterative process, like more product, less process, or MPLP? Did I add this collection and make it public to my end users in order to provide rapid access with the intention of building more structure, building more metadata around it later on? Am I still learning? Am I adding essential collections first while I learn digital preservation concepts and plan to go live once I'm satisfied with the end result? Starter can easily toggle your collection security between public and private in the back office Explorer UI by right-clicking on the collection or on an asset level. This means you do not need to purchase multiple storage devices for different levels of security. That can all be managed here in Starter. So once I elect to go public, a blue line will appear on the left-hand side of my collection, and that will let me know, explore easily, identifying which collections are going to be public or not. Note that if you do make a collection private or public, it will apply to all of its contents in that collection as well. These changes are immediate in Starter. There's no not your job. It'll happen right away. Note that you can go within those collections to toggle that. So if you want to make something go either public or private at a collection level, you can go inside and then further toggle those individual assets to augment and really customize your collection's accessibility. And you can see this in my front end, as I'll show you in a moment, by going back to my dashboard and clicking on the link to view my portal. You'll see those collections that I've made public are going to be in fact public and visible to my communities in the world. So I can jump in, view my public assets, and see that content on this page here. The bunny video, which I'll get into a little bit later, my public sector, which we viewed in previous demonstrations, and the content that I just displayed to you, the special collections, again, is made public to the end user. For the content that I do have, there are opportunities, of course, to share content to further promote outreach and advocacy. In the end user view, users can interact with my public collections, and then when they find something they like, they can immediately share the content via email, via Facebook, Twitter, or you can favorite material as well and return to it later on in the UI natively. What you might not know as professional users is that these URLs for the collection levels and individual assets are also permanent. Preservica creates permanent IDs called PUIDs, and this is the same in Starter as well. They are permanent unique identifiers, PUID, which will always retrieve the exact collection or asset, even if you move it to another place in your collection. That means you can use Starter URLs for libguides, for web pages, newsletters, emails. It's really up to you. The link will always return with your materials. So if you use Starter to promote collections for regular recurring events such as Indigenous Peoples Month, Black History Month, LGBT History Month, those links to files and folders will always route correctly to your content in Starter, which is great. Note that if you later elect to make this content private, if it was public, or if you delete them, those are, of course, the only conditions in which the end users would not be able to see the materials when clicking on that link. Let's go back to Explore. Our next tip deals with the differences between administrative and descriptive metadata. So when you're adding new content for ingest and Starter, the system will automatically use the file name from your operating system as the default name in your metadata. Let me explain and show you an example here. I'll take this file and drag and drop to ingest into Starter. Now, this is very helpful when we are ingesting new content that we want to be able to identify after ingest, as it will match one-to-one from my file source, right? It may be less helpful, of course, to an end user. For example, I downloaded this file from NASA's Hubble telescope site, and I had the default name of POTW2001A.jpg. It's an image of galaxy NGC 2770. The file name is helpful for me, so I can ensure the data has come over correctly, but it's not necessarily going to help my end user in understanding what this is, because the title with the file name is going to display to the end user when they get to that content. And let me explain and show you what I mean here. And I'm going to hide this view here. Oops. Let me just refresh really quick. And I'll go to this asset, open this up, and note here that we're going to need to edit the metadata to update the name that will display. And to do that, we'll need to access the asset and edit the title and description here. So I'll want to name this the correct name of Galaxy NGC 2770. Very fun sci-fi kind of name, right? So here we go, but not fiction, it is the name. And it's important to note that this is not, what I'm adding here for the metadata, it is not Dublin Core or mods. This is the administrative metadata. So think of technical metadata like premise. We would think of this as being the intellectual entity, that level of administrative naming of our content. So we will have bulk metadata editing tools and bulk ingest tools in a coming release. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on. But for now, as we are building our preservation best practice, it's a good tip to edit these as they appear nice and organized for our end users one by one as we're building this right now. Or if you're always going to go for the iterative approach and you need to get this content in and move on, you can always change the name later on too. You don't have to do it right away. And if I wish, I could also put this inside of a other collection, add, create new folder, and we'll call this brand new folder Hubble Telescope Pictures. And I'm going to give it a brief description just for this example that I pulled from Wikipedia. Cut and paste, and add that description here as well. Building a really nice descriptive collection here. And I'll take my item, pull it up to my Hubble Telescope Pictures, and I'm good to go. Another reason to have control over the title in this way is because the title sort features here in Starter are on the administrative metadata. Preservica includes sorting options for the type, title, description, and date out of the box to more easily sort and ultimately access our content. And let's see that over here in the front end tool. And I'll go back to my public access view. As you can see here, sorting by type, title, description, and date. So why, you might ask, are we using the administrative metadata for the title instead of using the descriptive metadata? Well, some institutions, like we mentioned, might not be adding additional descriptive metadata for all the content right away. They might be relying on the file name as the default title until there is time to add more information. Important considerations for sure. And now, as a final tip, let's go back to Explorer once more. And I'll go to my home view, and I want to show you the bunny video here that we've downloaded. Now, we want to reflect on the fact that in Starter, you have more options for working with different formats in the system. In digital preservation, we're not always accustomed to having rendering capability for many formats with access. There are not too many tools for digital preservation that provide ingest, metadata management, characterization, normalization, storage, access, and rendering of formats like audio and video. This means we have more options for enriching our metadata. That makes this page here, when I open up the trailer, really prime real estate for you to interact with your end users. Is there something that you want to add to the metadata to enrich the end user access based upon the format? Is there a specific timing or a start-stop point in the video you want to refer to in the metadata? Is there an important historical figure you want to point out, or an important donor you want to identify at a specific time in the video as well? Or are there certain terms you would use to make this more easily searchable to your end users? These are the kinds of things we can be thinking about. And of course, any edits we make to our content metadata here, it's instantly available to our end users in the public view. And finally, I want to bring your attention to the Starter Public Access Showcase. The Starter site for our 3 guest speakers are here on our site as a showcase. This is a great resource to see Starter users and how they've customized their branding. Note that the branding of icons, background images, and display text in the sites we've seen so far, for example, in Limestone County and in Rollins College, these features here are available in Starter Plus Edition. I'll show you as it loads here. You can see the example of the background image, the logo, and a bit about us, and that's how you can get that level of customization as well. So in closing, remember, a powerful portal not only allows you to serve your communities and create a really great living archive, but it also satisfies the needs of donors and stakeholders, right? As we prove the value of digital preservation and raise the profile and relevance of the archive really as a whole. So really quick, I want to switch back to the slides. David, we have created another try this exercise for you to review immediately after this training. Thank you. Here you can walk through some of the pointers we discussed today, becoming familiar with the private public sharing features, sharing content to email or social services, and using the favorite icon as well. So please try this for this and all of our exercises in the Starter Resource Library, which is accessible in the Starter homepage within your Starter dashboard. And now, to share with us his implementation of the Starter system, I have the pleasure to introduce you to one of our beta testers, David Kay, Consulting Archivist of Digital Archivy. David Kay is an experienced information professional and digital archivist. He worked as a digital archivist at an animation studio and, I love this, was a digital asset manager at Nickelodeon. He has also worked as a consulting archivist for a wide variety of corporate and nonprofit archives, where he helps to create cost-effective solutions and user-focused strategies. Recently, he's been building an image archive for an online magazine. Over to you, David.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me and see me all right?
Yes, we can see you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. My name is David Kay. It's my pleasure to speak with you today. I'm a consulting archivist for Digital Archivy. We provide practical and trusted digital archiving and information management services to nonprofits, individuals, and families. Last year, I began working with a nonprofit online magazine called Talker of the Town. The editor-in-chief needed help in assessing his needs and developing a strategy to gain awareness and provide access to his archive of images. We developed a plan to create an image archive. The editor and I defined a designated community and created 2 personas for 4 typical use cases. As I began working with Talker, Preservica invited me to be a part of their beta testing team. They gave us 5 gigabytes of storage space and a system for adding metadata and publishing assets. We also had bi-weekly meetings and we learned how to use Starter. And we raised many questions and concerns from a user perspective. This helped me learn workflows and find best practices to improve user experience. And I brought many of my lessons that I learned from those sessions back to Talker. And I'd like to show you the results. Let me tell you about Talker of the Town. Show my screen. All right. So I'm going to tell you about Talker of the Town. This is an online magazine that was created in Rochester, New York, my hometown. And it's been around since 2015. It's a WordPress site. And they publish about 5 articles per week and about 250 articles per year. They catalog their archives internally by the title of the article, the author, the date published, and the subject. So you can see some of the metadata is already here. This is the title. Here's the creator. If you can see the small print. Here's the subject category. Here's the date uploaded. And you also have the subject categories up here. Each of these articles has about 7 to 10 photos or images associated with them. But on the website, you'll see after we finish this demo how you're only getting the tip of the iceberg by the titles. So what we helped the editor-in-chief to do was to create a schema and an inventory of articles that they had published over a certain time period. We suggested that we work on a 6-week inventory, and with the help of the Talker editor-in-chief, we were able to create an inventory of about 30 articles and about 300 images. And you can see here the breakdown by the subject category. And within the inventory that we were creating, we were capturing the article title and the subject, as well as the subject. We made sure that the subject categories would be mutually exclusive. And we used this as a way to get a representative sample of what the content data for the site would be with a 6-week representative sample. Part of what we were doing was also creating a designated community. And we did that by focusing on 2 personas. The first persona is George. He's a contributor. He's also a professor of philosophy in Rochester. And he's also writes some articles and takes photographs for the articles. And as you can see from the slide here, he's having difficulties finding the photos that are associated with each of his articles, and he can never remember how many photos he has per article or even how many articles he's published. The second persona is David, the editor-in-chief, and in interviews with him, he pointed out that some of the problems that he's facing is, for example, I can never remember which photos go with which articles. Over the course of the 6 years that they've been doing this, they've published about 1,500 articles and they have about 13,000 photos. And they're all named haphazardly. There's no file naming convention. So that makes it even more difficult for him to find images from particular articles without remembering the very specific usage of the image. Another problem that he was facing, and was facing until we started working on this, was he was unable to browse photos by category. As we mentioned, he's already organizing his site with subject categories, and he wants to have a way to aggregate the photos for some of those subjects, such as education or history, and be able to reuse those just by putting in a subject category and searching for photos by the subject of the article with which they were published. And then his dream is to be able to map some of these data points onto a map so that people in Rochester would be able to find some of the landmarks and specific sites and locations of the photos themselves. So with this information, we started to focus on task-oriented results. And as we discussed with them, there are issues. It all came down to understanding their search habits and their search needs. And from this simple database that we had, we began to realize that there were connections that we could make between the information that we were collecting from the assets, including the file name and the date uploaded. But we could also enhance that data with information that would make it more useful for the users and for their specific needs. For example, we could capture data about the contributor and the photographers that we'd be immediately addressing the specific needs of persona 1, George the photographer. We also made sure that within the Dublin Core Standard, we were going to capture the subject, so we'd have the subject categories. This would make it useful for aggregating the data so that the editor-in-chief would be able to look through all the photos under some of those subject categories and find new opportunities for reuse. And then with that in mind, we began to focus on capturing location and geolocations and beginning to think about ways that we would be able to use that data in the future in new apps or perhaps in enhancements that may come through Preservica Starter. Who knows if that'll happen, but it's something to keep on the roadmap, for us anyway. With that in mind, we then, decided to do that 6-week sample and focus on the results.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Okay, so we're going to close out of the PowerPoint, and I'm going to go to the online example of Talker and the results of what our work wrought. Here is Talker of the Town. As you can see, and as we discussed, they have the subject categories up here. You can see sports, education, cultural life, social issues, politics, history, and human interest. You have a slideshow of recent articles. This one is under the category of sports. It's titled The Last NBA Regular Season Game in Rochester. You can see the creator was David Kramer, the publisher, the editor-in-chief, and the date it was published. And as the slideshow goes on, you can see that there's other articles down here that are also associated with Rochester. This one down here is related to cultural life. This one up here is related to cultural life. This one is related to history. And you can see that within this, they already have a cataloging scheme. And for me, as the archivist who's helping them put together an image archive, we were going to focus on how to make the image archive more useful to them than the website. So to do that, we had to become more familiar with the site itself. So for example, we would click into the articles and begin creating that inventory of the title, the creator, the date published, and the subject, but then look through this and see that here's a hero photo and here's a caption, and the caption has information that's valuable and useful and would be useful for usage and users in the future. There's also a byline, so we can make sure that the person who actually wrote this, the contributor, is credited as the author. You can see, rather than a photograph, we have images. This is a scanned image. Here's a clipping from a newspaper. Here's an image of Eastman Theater, where Leonard Bernstein had his conducted the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra in 1947. The photo is from December of last year. So you get a sense of how each of these images helps to inform the story that's told within the article. And with that in mind, we decided that what we would do to make this a reality was to create an image archive, and to create it in such a way that the editor-in-chief would have an opportunity to gain access, but also awareness, and be accountable for the images that were published with each of the articles. What I did is we used a 6-week sample, and I made a Talker of the Town archive. And I'll just show you in here to give you a sense of how we would be able to do those searches that we discussed earlier. And I'll wait while it's loading and go to the search engine here. Sometimes it takes a little while for the assets to load. And okay, so as you can see from here, and I'll hope for to stall until it loads all the way so I can make use of the search functions. But as you can see here, and as Andrew was pointing out earlier, if you add metadata to the underneath the file names of the thumbnails, you begin to get a fuller understanding of the context of the actual photos. In this case, we have the file names here, and we also have a title underneath it, which relates back to the title of the article. So if I click into this asset, you can see the full metadata record. And this was one of the choices that I helped the client, Talker, editor-in-chief, make the decision to go with Dublin Core metadata. And with the Dublin Core metadata, we were able to map their needs, their specific needs related to the title of the article, the creator of the article, the author, the subject, back to the subject categories that we saw on the website, the caption. In some cases, there's a caption that describes some information from the website about the photograph itself, the publisher, who is the name of the online magazine. And then all of these other things were field within Dublin Core that the Talker of the Town said were required fields, and we needed to capture the data to make it a fully functional system. And with that in mind, that's what we did. And we made sure that the metadata capture was consistent, and we made sure that we were able to do this in an efficient way so that we were able to capture accurate data as needed. So what I'm going to show you now, and I hope you have questions and can put them into the chat box, and the team will be able to pass them on to me. But I'd like to show you that to address the specific needs that we had talked about with the personas, the designated community, we'd come up with 4 or 5 possible searches or browses. And among those were the title. So if I search by the title, and I search by the title, then you'll be able to see that 3 photos are associated with that particular article title. If I were to find a different article title, there would be more. I will show that. The other way that we wanted to be able to search was to show that we could search by the contributor or the photographer George. So in that case, we'll get back to the title one, but I wanted to do the photographer George Cassidy Payne. And you can see all of the photos that are associated with articles that he's published or photographs that he's taken. And that brings, from the total asset collection of nearly 300 assets, we can see that there's 29 photos that he is responsible for, that he created or are his headshots. And then we can look into those and see that there are ways to, I'm just going to click into this one metadata and find this title and see if there's a way to search, or show there's a way to search by the title. And then we'll be able to get all of the photos that are associated with that particular article title. The other way that we had discussed with them was ways, well, I'll just show you Talker. We'll go back to the full collection of all of the assets in the image archive of Talker. And you can see there's 297 results. Each of those is searchable by the title. Each of those is searchable by the contributor or the photographer. And each of those is also searchable by the title, by the subject, and then browsable by the subject, or just browsable by the subject. So for example, if we put in political or social issues, you can see that of the 297 assets that we had cataloged and ingested, of those, 74 are related to social issues. If we click in on one of those, for example, you will be able to see, and I'll be able to show you that if we take the title, Snowy 100th Veterans Day in Brighton and Battle of the Bulge, or the title and the metadata, I have it as the same thing. If you take the title of the article and put that into the search engine, you should get all of the photos that are associated with that particular title. And so you can see there were 12 photos associated with that specific article title. You can also link back to the article to see the text in its original context. Because in the relation field, we had captured the URL. So then if I go back and put the URL in here, you can see that it links back to the original article. And as you see some of the thumbnails, you might recognize them from the Preservica public portal as well. This is from the original site. And this is the site in the image archive that provides the editor-in-chief and the contributors access to all of the photos from each of the articles. So that is basically it. I know that we had discussed some of the issues related to file naming, and Andrew went through that a little bit earlier. What I did here, as you can see, is I have file naming rules. So it's very important to the editor-in-chief to have file naming rules so that the publisher, TOTT, for Talker of the Town, and the date it was published would be easily readable from the title. That's useful for that particular case. It's also helpful to know that in Preservica, you can do wildcard searches so that you can search for the prefix of the file. So I can search for 1111 and see if I get other images from that with that file name prefix. But those are 11 photos from that with that particular file name prefix. The other thing to keep in mind is, in this case, because it was an online magazine, it was very easy for us because all of the photos that we were dealing with were, well, not all, but with very few exceptions, they were JPEGs. So we didn't really have to worry about figuring out what to do about cropping other images. We could just go online, download those photos, rename them, and ingest them. And then because we already knew what metadata we needed to capture, we made sure that once we had Dublin Core established and selected, we made sure to use all of the Dublin Core fields that we needed. And we could use some of those as placeholders so that we could have additional researchers go in later and add additional metadata related to captions, for example. So this was helpful way for us to identify a good workflow that would be based on best practice and archival standards and would provide a useful and winning user experience. And that's the story of the Talker of the Town image archive. It took us about 6 weeks to go from inventory to image archive. The key for us was to build it around the original order of the content and the designated community's primary needs. We arranged and described each image in groups based upon original context. From ingest to publish, it took about 2 minutes per asset. To build a winning UX, we identified a designated community. We came up with 4 to 5 different use cases, created a sample inventory of a 6-week collection of articles, and focused on search and browse. Specifically, we wanted to focus on searching by title, the article title, searching by creator or contributor, browsing by subject, and browsing by location. We made the experience more winning by focusing on the user experience and establishing file naming rules, format controls, standardizing metadata with Dublin Core, and creating controlled vocabularies. Talker of the Town built its image archive in Preservica. It is user-focused and task-oriented. They are thrilled to have access to a representative sample of their image archive. We're planning next steps to scale up and begin ingest and cataloging work of more images from their large backlog. Thank you very much for your time, and Andrew, back to you.
Thank you, David, so much. Starter has really benefited so much from your use case, careful eye towards system features, and really how to best deliver value to end users who may not be experts in digital preservation, right? But they are the primary consumers and intended audience, especially for your use case, requiring easy access to your collection. So David, thank you so much. I want to leave everyone with a few of the tips we learned today on how to ensure an easy and successful rollout to your end users with Starter. Remember, consider the discovery needs of your target personas, right? It may differ between our different institutions. Our beta testers range from academic institutions, public institutions, county, state, corporate institutions, and your design decisions may change accordingly. So we'll keep a careful eye there. The public and private toggle, of course, we mentioned at the collection and asset level is going to be important when we think about where we are in our planning. Are we going to keep some things internal? Are they going to be part of an iterative process where we add more information over time? Do I need to toggle that and keep awareness of that? That's built into Starter as well. And as David mentioned, really paying attention to those file naming rules for improved searching and browsing. And lastly, the considerations for format types, right? And the opportunities you have now for enrichment with tools that maybe you didn't have access to before. Are there different things you'd want to do now that you have that opportunity to display things a little bit more uniquely? So yeah, we'll leave you with that. Next slide, please. With everything you've seen so far, I want to remind everyone that this is one of our early releases of Starter, right? We're just getting started. We're not slowing down. We have upcoming bulk metadata editing, bulk ingest. We're going to be improving the portal appearance continually. The editing you've seen so far, the options you've seen so far, that's going to be only improving over time. So we'll have more options coming, and of course, enhanced search as well. So please stay tuned. And next slide will bring us to our poll. We have another poll for everyone here. We'd like to ask you, would you benefit from in-product feature overview videos? If you have a moment, please feel free to select yes or no, and we'd love to hear your opinion on this. Give everyone just a few more seconds. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for following the demos and upcoming features today. Looks like the answer is yes. We would like to see that. Wonderful. Okay, thank you for that feedback. That really helps us quite a bit. All right, and thank you again for following along and learning what's coming up soon. And here we'll pass things back over to you, Lori.
Thank you, Andrew. I would say that was a resounding yes from the poll. So thank you very much for that. So I just want to remind you that you are a member of a vibrant community of users. And so there are lots of ways for you to collaborate and connect, to learn from other folks, to talk to Preservica about your needs and questions that you have. There's a community forum, which is a growing collection of content topics and where you'll find the training session assets and how-to guides. So we hope you'll check those out. There's blogs and other resources. And of course, we often get more questions during a session than we can reasonably answer, or we need to consult other folks within Preservica to get you the correct information. And so what we do is we gather up the questions that you ask, and we get answers and we post them out to the resource center. So if you didn't hear your question or you asked for us not to display it during the conversation, then you can find your answer later on. So our next and final training session for getting you going with Starter happens next week, same time, same station, same login. Our guest speaker will be Rachel Onif. Rachel is with the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration, and she's a champion of outreach. She is on the move all the time, speaking with academic institutions, cultural heritage institutions, public sector, and she's going to share her experience with Starter and also help to lay out some of the points that we want to share with you about making the business case for preservation. We know that many of you are using Starter to gain some momentum, to stimulate conversations and indicate where you need some resources to build out your archive. And so Rachel's going to help us with some perspectives there. So we look forward to speaking with her. We also want to offer an incentive for you to be loading up your digital archive, testing out all the features that Andrew and David shared with you. And so we welcome you to join our Hall of Fame. Andrew showed the showcase, and we would love to add some additional portals. So by the end of February, if you would like to submit to us your digital archive, your public portal, our speakers through this series will be our judges, and they will pick 21 of those sites to be branded for free, which is a Starter Plus feature, and add you to our showcase. So we would very much like to help you boost visibility and access to your resources. So if that is of interest to you, please signal to us by the end of February that you'd like to join in that initiative. And with that, we're going to turn over to some questions. So I'm going to pick one here, which was for David K. And I have a question for David too. So let's see. For David, do you have lists of subjects, contributors, etc., somewhere for end users to know which specific subjects you have available to search? Make sure you're unmuted there, David.
The list that we have, and I think it's something that the editor-in-chief is taking under consideration, is pretty broad. As I showed you on the site, it's mostly subjects like sports, education, social issues, politics, and that type of thing. Within that, there are ways to hone in on other subjects that might be useful. For example, the editor-in-chief says he has a large baseball card collection, but someone else has a big football card collection. That's not really true, but he has a large baseball card collection, but other people might be more interested in football or basketball. So it might be useful for them to develop that and create almost a subject level taxonomy or topical or topics that can be put into these subjects so that people would be able to do that with a more effective search.
Thank you. Here's a general question for Andrew, which relates to the branding of the portal. Is there always all that purple, even with customization?
It's a great question. No, we have the option to be changing our branding right now. You've seen so far some purple in there. We're going to be having more opportunities for further customization coming soon. But as you saw on the other sites and in previous weeks for Rollins College and Limestone County, there are different design elements we can be adding for background images and for logo and context. So we're going to have more opportunities coming soon.
That's great. And there was a question from Bruce wondering if you could just repeat the name of our UX designer because they're interested in following some more of her work.
Yes, absolutely. Sandra Barkhuizen, and maybe David Portman or someone can type that into the chat so we can share Sandra's name. Sandra is excellent, and we love Sandra, and you can't have her. I'll just put that out there. She's wonderful.
I have a question for David Kay, which is to share some thoughts about how the process for Talker of the Town, how their internal processes, once they have this image archive, might be changed. Will they upload images there first? Will they wait till something's published? So just a little bit of discussion about how having the archive might enhance or improve or alter their processes.
Thank you for asking that. It's a great question, and it's something that I've been discussing with them, because as we see it now, the image archive will be a reaction to the website. It's a solution to a problem. So what we envision is that we'll continue, the contributors and the editor-in-chief will continue using their site as usual, but they'll periodically do it themselves or hire interns or do some type of capstone program with some of the universities to get a team of archivists or deputized archivists to do some digital asset management work on it. The idea would be that what my deliverables are for them is a guide as to what to do with the workflow, how to establish best practices, what metadata they need, what fields, and then to train them into understanding how to do that, why to do it, and how they can leverage that. So right now, the idea is that the image archive will be sort of a useful tool for researchers and a possible a way to do outreach to build their community, but without touching the articles in their original context on the published site.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A question here, is Preservica indexed on Google for users to discover the content, and can it be integrated with other systems, Andrew?
That's a great question. We had it pop up a couple times in the questions I saw. So the answer is yes. If you were to publish your content to start in the front end to make it public, and you were to search for like an exact string or search for your content, it would pop up in Google. It is indexed as it's exposed to the world, so you can get your content serviced that way. That is right now the opportunity we have for surfacing content in a search engine. There are opportunities in other editions of Preservica, higher editions, for integration with different discovery solutions. We have Preservica customers that integrate with the Digital Public Library of America, with discovery solutions, open source and proprietary like Ex Libris Primo. So there are opportunities to get your content out there and visible and linked with the rest of the world.
David Kay, there's a question here I think that will be great for you to comment on. It says it looks like your system is being used as a digital asset management system rather than a digital preservation system. I think that point that you made about the images and what format they were. So can you speak to that?
Yes, good observation. It is really being used more as a digital asset management system, although we're trying to leverage the content, so we're really trying to make use of the content. With regards to the preservation, right now, part of this has been a learning curve for me using Preservica Starter. I'm not going to lie, and part of it is understanding how from ingest to publishing things change or things don't happen the way you think they do. So, for example, when I ingest JPEGs, that's great, nothing happens. They're not converted to PNG, they're not converted to PDF, they're not converted to anything. So right now, if the editor-in-chief wants to go to the image archive and download something, he's going to get the original. That's pretty cool. But that may not be the best case scenario. For him, he might want to have a preservation copy of images that are in PDF format. We haven't really gone down that road, but there are things that, for preservation, it might be useful to be able to select what to make as a preservation format. Just on the other hand, we put up a PPTX file of a demo that we had done, he and I, and that is converted to a preservation format of PDF, which is really helpful, because when we tried to create a preservation format of PDF from the Microsoft program, the PDF becomes astronomically large, like 180 megs large, as opposed to 8 megs in the beginning. So in some ways, Preservica Starter can be used for preservation tasks, but I'm not quite sure which ones qualify. JPEGs don't seem to qualify yet. That may change, or that may be something that I just haven't found yet. PPTX, that does go into a preservation format, and that to me is exciting. The other part about the JPEG, I don't know, maybe that's a decision that someone at Preservica had made, and maybe Andrew or someone else can tell me what I'm missing.
That's a really good question. So these are the considerations that we definitely have built into Preservica, and really it comes from the full Preservica product. Think of Preservica as a platform for really all of our solutions, pulling from this really important registry of formats that are being informed by a lot of different places. From the pronoun registry in the UK, we look to NARA's updates and guidance for when certain formats are going to be considered to be higher risk, and things like this are all under consideration. So we pull that from many different places, and we, as David, you mentioned, we're kind of putting that into a new solution for everyone to kind of learn, digest, and see the benefits of those changes there. And it's evolving. Those decisions that we've made and those considerations change over time as preservation needs change over time as well. So we're all learning. We're all on the journey together.
There's a general question, Andrew, that I thought you could tackle, which is that does Preservica anticipate the day when it will be made available and affordable for individuals? And Donna here is thinking about family or genealogical archives. So maybe you could just explain our vision for Starter and Starter editions.
That's a great question. It's something we've definitely talked about quite a bit internally. Right now, as we've seen, Starter is really, anyone can go there and download and begin to use the system, get familiar with it, and scale out. We have seen for our major platform customers, it does grow into institutional wide goals and plans. Right now, there is no concrete plan for individuals to have their own, family photo system. I would love one, but it's something we have discussed internally. Would you add anything to that, Lori?
Just that I would say that the version that's out there now, the free version, is free forever. Maybe your family or genealogical archive is large, I don't know, but the 5 gigs are free forever. So hopefully that provides an opportunity right now for folks to be collecting even those private collections. So thank you very much. We're coming up on the end of our time. As we said, if we didn't address your question now, we will capture it and provide an answer and upload that to the Starter resource site. So really a great thank you to David Kay, who shares a hometown with me, Rochester, New York. So it's great to see some bits and pieces of Rochester, New York on the screen. So thank you so much, David, for sharing your expertise and your experience. And thanks to Andrew. And we hope to see all of you next week for our 4th and final training session. See you soon. Take care and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.